Welcome to Psychology Today. I'm your host, Ann Morrow. Thank you for watching. What is psychology? It's the science of propelling oneself safely through the environment to enhance well-being. Our show is about bicycling in general and the celebration of our local cyclists. We offer it monthly to try to help you find your way onto the bicycle and to well-being. Our guest is the Executive Director of American Lung Association. It's Julian Dillon. We'll find out more about ALA, and then we'll discuss a very popular Reach the Beach, Oregon bicycle ride, which is going to happen in May. We hope that Psychology Today helps inspire you to ride a bike and be more mindful about safety. Those of us that volunteer for Psychology Today believe there's an abundance of bicycling activity to celebrate in the Portland metro area, and we endeavor to help you and introduce you to our community of cyclists. I want to share a quick thank you to our production team that's behind the scenes, without whom we would not have a show. So welcome to Julian Dillon.
Great to be here.
Glad you're here. So I always like to start with a little background. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. So I'm the Executive Director of the American Lung Association here in Oregon. I've held that position for just a little under 2 years. I started on a rather auspicious date, which was March the 16th, which exactly, the very day everything shut down. And in actual fact, I was working with another organization down in Los Angeles. So I spent the first 6 months pretending to be in Oregon, as it were, thanks to Zoom and other effects. And then finally made it up here in September of last year, and have just had a most wonderful time getting to know Portland and Oregon and the great people of the Pacific Northwest.
So you have a charming accent. Tell us how you came to have that.
I found that in Ireland, where I grew up. I grew up in Dublin. I went to high school there and I went to college there. And then not too long after that, I went and I worked in New York City for a couple of years, and then went over to California and spent, gosh, a good 30 plus years until I had the opportunity to come up here. I had been here before. It wasn't a total transformation. I have family in Vancouver, and and Portland seems to be a place for conferences and things like that, and I hope it certainly will come back to that very soon.
Yes.
So I would be up for work occasionally. So that's my story in a nutshell.
Okay. Well, welcome kind of belatedly to the Northwest.
Thank you.
Glad to have you here. So are you a cyclist?
Yes and no. Yes. It's interesting you say that, because people, often I will talk to them on the phone to see if they're interested in doing our bike ride, and I'll say to them, are you a cyclist? And they will say no. So I would say, do you have a bike? And they will say yes. And I would say, well, what do you do with the bike? And they would say, well, we get on the bike and we ride around the place. So, you know, I know for the more experienced cyclists, they might feel there's a distinction between them and a rider who does that. But yes, I have a bike, and I'm afraid to say it's been hanging on a hook in the shed in our new house, now that we've moved here, for the last while. But I would ride up to maybe about 40 miles at a go. But before you get too impressed, I had one rule: no hills. So I was able to carve out this ride from roughly Malibu. Now, I did not live in Malibu, I want to point out. I work for non-profits. But, so I would ride from Malibu down to roughly Long Beach, for any of your viewers who are familiar with the territory, and back. And that was a really pleasant ride all along the coast, with a couple of meanders inland to make the 40 miles. So I am looking forward to, first of all, finding some flat rides here and enjoying them.
Boy, you know, flat around here is a little challenging, but flatter, you know,
exactly.
I can offer you. Yes.
Thank you. I'll take you up on that.
If nothing else, there's, you know, bridges and
exactly.
overpasses, and no Pacific Ocean to ride along. So, did you ride bikes as a child?
Yes.
Okay.
When I grew up, my parents, and I think really everybody around me, this was not a place, Dublin, where kids were driven to school. They were either the bus or on your bike. And I loved the bike because I had total freedom, and then especially when you got into the teenage years, you could just go wherever you want and creep in rather quietly at night after curfew.
Might have to edit that part out.
Yeah, you can.
So, and you're right, and so many people share that about that independence and that freedom to go further and further away from home. And we always say, too, that I think bicyclists make better drivers because you've learned a lot about the rules of the road.
Absolutely.
So, well, we'll try to get you out on the bike. Let's get into American Lung Association. Sure. So, as you said, you're the executive director of the Oregon branch of American Lung Association, or ALA. And so tell us how you came to be involved. Why did you want this job, and what are you doing for them as executive director?
Gosh, I have been for probably the last 14, 15 years involved in one nonprofit or another. And I very much like the idea of being able to raise funds and bring attention to healthcare or social issues, and to, if you like, level the playing field. Because two people can have the same disease, but one person has the ability to receive a certain level of treatment, or even just to get the information. Because in a lot of these cases, information is prevention, and prevention is, you know, a very important part of healthcare. So I've always been very passionate about wanting to level the playing field there. And I also enjoy the idea of what we call technically peer-to-peer fundraising events, which is where one person decides to take an action, whether it's riding a bike, climbing a building, jumping out of a plane with a parachute, and they ask their friends, co-workers and whoever to donate to the charity, and they'll jump out of the plane.
Yeah.
So that's been my passion, and I've been lucky enough to be able to carry that. This is now the third organization I'm with.
Yeah.
But, you know, I got a phone call one day. Was I interested in talking to some people at the American Lung Association? And I said, yes, where do I sign?
Well, good. Again, glad to have you here. And that's really interesting. I mean, it must be kind of a feel-good job for you then, for the most part.
It's an interesting job, and I know we'll get to talk about this in a second, because in the previous jobs I had, it was, for want of a better word, one disease. One cause. The American Lung Association covers so many different areas that all fall under the umbrella of lung health. And I think that was my first big eye-opener when I started to look at this and go, oh my gosh, we do this, oh, we do that. And I still see that look in other people's faces when, you know, when I get to talk about what we actually do and how much we do and the breadth of it.
Yeah, and that was certainly an education for me as well. I don't know anywhere near as much as you. So yeah, let's talk a little bit about the bigger picture of American Lung Association and talk about the objectives that they have. And after we learn more about the organization itself, then we'll talk about the bike ride to raise money for that organization. Sure. So let's see, to start with, American Lung Association, I mean, it seems like the first thing we're going to think about is lung cancer. So what's involved in improving lung health and preventing lung disease? Sure.
So let me start with the mission, which is to save lives by improving lung health and preventing lung disease. We are an organization that is over 115 years old. It was started by a group of volunteers to address the biggest health crisis of the time, which is the very beginning of the 1900s, and this was tuberculosis. And so that was that's how the organization originally began. And the logo we still have, which is kind of a double-crossed, is actually related directly to TB.
Yeah.
So TB is almost entirely gone, but there's still some of it there. So from that, the organization kind of evolved into taking a broader look about all areas of lung health. And over the years, we've been able to do some pretty extraordinary things. I mean, a lot of your viewers out there will remember this, when people used to be able to smoke on the back half of the aeroplane. And if you nowadays, when you describe that to a younger generation, they're like, they did what?
Yeah, yeah.
It seems so crazy that you would agree to light up in a pressurized cabin. But we were very much involved in making that happen. We're very much involved in the establishment of the Clean Air Act. So those are some of the steps that we took along the way, and obviously the latest sort of turn has been the arrival of COVID, and we've been very involved with that, and I hope we'll get a chance to talk a bit more about that a little bit later. But you know, you mentioned, because I think most people initially associate our organisation with lung cancer. And we do a lot of other things, but I do think it's important to remember that every 2.5 minutes somebody is diagnosed in America with lung cancer. So you and I have probably been talking for close to 5 minutes right now. So 2 more people have already learned that they have lung cancer. And it is one of the biggest killers of men and women in America, in terms of cancer, certainly. I know when I joined, that was an aha moment for me, because when I thought about it, about women, and someone said to me, well, what's the biggest cause, cancer cause? I was inclined to think, okay, it must be breast cancer.
Sure.
No, it's lung cancer. I mean, I'm not trying to start a competition about,
Yeah,
because each disease is horrible and very unfortunate
absolutely.
to get. There's a couple of interesting things too about lung cancer. I was talking recently to a woman who had lost her mother 4 years ago to lung cancer, and her mother never smoked. And she was absolutely astonished to learn, as was all of her family members, that there were other ways you could get lung cancer. And there are, unfortunately. I mean, you know, no disease is fair. So sometimes you can live, not smoke, not drink, live all the healthiest things possible, and you're gone at 36.
Yes.
But there are other areas which I learned about, like radon, which is something that I think most of us only think about when we get those sort of little one-page part of a report buried in the, if you're lucky enough to be able to buy a house or you're selling a house. And it's one of these things that you don't really pay attention to, I don't think, because the guy comes, says you're fine for radon.
Yeah.
And
You go, yeah.
yeah, because you're busy trying to put your initial in 75 different places, those long forms. So, but radon is in every building. It's why they talk about taking a really good look at your basement, because it comes up through the ground. And it's essentially, it's a kind of a radiation, if you like, and it's there, and it kills 21,000 Americans a year, or it's the cause of 21,000 American deaths through lung cancer every year. So I learned things like that, and I learned also something which I'm very proud the American Lung Association talks about, which is health disparities. And that takes up a lot of different shapes and forms. But, for example, African Americans in Oregon have a 16% less favorable outcome from lung cancer, and then it's like 15% for Latinos, and it's all around there for all the different groups, whether it's Indigenous Americans, Asian Americans. In fact, per 100, I think I'll get this right now, per 100,000, there is a kind of national average per 100,000 people. So Oregon, for white Oregonians, we are actually in the plus. They have a more positive outcome. But for Oregonians from any other group, it's not so good. It's below the American standard. So those are some of the things that I've just learned by starting with this organization.
And trying to make some strides in that disparity.
Yes.
To, like you said earlier, level the playing field.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I'm sure we're on board with that. How does the American Lung Association help people overcome nicotine addiction or smoking?
Oh, that's a great question. So we have a couple of programs. First of all, the big thing is go to lung.org. So that is, I'll talk later about our specific bike ride website, but this is the website that's for everything we do. And it is a wealth of information. And you can put in tobacco cessation. You can look for something like NOT, which is literally not on tobacco. Or you can look for In Depth, which is a more specific program. And those two are for kids. But then there's also a whole heap of programs that are aimed at adults. The interesting thing about all our programs, and let's look at the children's one or the kids' one. Well, first of all, I was amazed to discover that 13 out of every 100 middle school children will admit Yeah, you're laughing,
Yeah.
exactly. You're seeing the irony. Will admit to tobacco use.
Whoa.
So that makes you think, well, how many are actually doing it?
Yeah.
And then 31 out of every 100 from high school. So, and a lot of that is vaping and flavored tobacco products. And, you know, the Surgeon General is now describing vaping as an epidemic, which it is. It's an astonishing thing. But some of these programs that we have, like NOT, for example, it's about putting a choice to smoke in a context. So it's not like, when I was growing up, there was, you know, maybe one time there would be a lecture about not smoking. And it involved basically somebody telling you not to smoke and them showing you terrifying photographs of what a lung looks like if you've been using tobacco. What we're trying to do is to contextualize people's lives. So in other words, it's what are you doing for physical activity? You know, what are you doing about the stress in your life? How are your coping skills? And putting the choice to indulge in tobacco into that context. And that's the sort of broad view of NOT. In-depth is something that I absolutely love, because the idea behind in-depth was the real, and you know, they say the best ideas are often the simplest and most obvious, is often if a kid is caught smoking in the environment of their, say, high school, okay, they're probably suspended, or they're giving a warning, they're caught again, they're suspended. So where do they go? Very often they go to a less structured place. So now they've got a week or however long, and probably the parents are working, or there's other things going on. So what are they going to do?
Yeah.
So in-depth was like, well, how about we don't send them home? How about we do like a train the trainer program, and we train teachers or other people connected with the school how to bring these kids in after school, keep them in the school area and talk to them, and then move them into a kind of NOT sort of situation as I described earlier. And I think that is an amazing idea. Now, because of COVID and the whole thing with are we in school, are we out of school, that's been a little bit more difficult to run.
Sure.
But I certainly look forward, and I know that the team that does this is just ready to go the second we can go, you know, full swoop back in on that. And then we have an advocacy side, because there was an ordinance, for example, in Washington County, where we are sitting right now, I believe. I'm getting my geography right, am I?
I think we are, yes.
Which was passed by Washington County, that would restrict flavoured tobacco and flavoured tobacco products. So forces opposed to that got to work, and now on May 17th there's a vote to repeal that. So that's one of those situations where we're in there, and we're trying to discuss this with the community to encourage them that they would make a no vote on this.
Yeah.
And that's one of the big things that we are able to do, which is talk to people and try to shape public policy so that we can have a better outcome for people. And we do that in all areas of what we do.
Well, that's all very impressive. So you also do research.
We do.
And so tell us about some of that, like to stop future respiratory viruses, such as pandemics.
Yeah, so a big thing about well, first of all, we have funded, it's actually $198 million in research just since 2000. We have created 24 different research projects in the last 2 years that are specifically looking at COVID, long COVID, and the bit that gets me the most excited is how are we going to be better prepared should another pandemic like this come along. And we're looking at things like, and the other thing about this that I like is that they impact more than the subject, so they impact more than just COVID. They're looking at things like air pollution, the environment you live in, because it was very clear that people who lived in an environment where the atmosphere was worse, the air they were breathing was worse, they had a higher degree of a negative outcome if they ended up in the hospital because of COVID. So there's actually a great research project we're funding, which is happening in Washington State, which is looking at that. And very interestingly, I'm a city boy. So when you say bad air, I think, okay, living next to a freeway, next to a thing. This is out in rural Washington.
Oh.
Where we're talking about methane. We're talking about something as simple as, if you could imagine two people who have the same job where they both are operating machinery, vehicles during that. You've got one guy who's driving for a typical big package delivery company, and the other guy who's operating, say, a tractor. Well, one is sitting, on chances are, on a very well-maintained electric vehicle, spending his or her day going around on that. The other one is sitting on something that is spewing far less. Now, I'm sure there are some farms that, they're more up to date, but that's the kind of thing. And when I heard we were doing that, I thought, that is really interesting. And it also goes back to the disparities thing, because most, or a good portion of the people impacted in this particular study are from a minority.
Yeah.
Largely, I would say Hispanic.
Yes.
Who are working on these farms, and they're the ones that we're looking at. So all of this will hopefully give us better information.
Yeah.
Because if you think about it, if you go to the doctor when you've got something going on with your lungs, your doctor will ask you all sorts of questions, but they may not ask you, where do you live?
Yeah.
And that actually, I think, should be in there, because then the doctor might go, oh, there's an environmental issue there. So maybe we need to factor this into our thoughts about what might be going on in this person's lungs.
Well, when you say it, it's seeming so obvious, but yeah, those are not asked questions. Well, before we go to the break, I want to talk about the credibility of American Lung Association. That is, what confidence can we have that our donations are actually going to go to these wonderful programs that you just described, and not build the heliport for the CEO or something like that, because those are the horror stories And I want to mention too, and you'll probably touch on this sort of thing, that I looked at Charity Navigator, which is a good resource, and ALA has a 4 out of 4. People can give with confidence.
Yes.
So what else can you share with
that's
us?
Called a 4-star rating, and I'm very proud of that. And I think it is really important to ask this question, because people really do want to know, and they want to know where their dollars are going, and they want to know, as you say, it's not going to a helicopter or a golf trip in Vegas or something like that. So yes, we have a 4-star Charity Navigator, which is the highest that you can get. We spend 90% of every dollar raised on those programs I've just talked about. So that means only 10% is actually paying the electricity, the building rental, salaries, insurance, everything you can possibly think of. And that's why, in part, we have a 4-star rating, because we are very careful with what is actually your money. You have chosen to give this to us. We need to be very responsible with this. And I also think we do well because we can pivot. We were able to move into the sphere of dealing with COVID-19 so fast when that came up. I mean, we've funded 24 research projects since March the 16th, the day I started. I can't take pride. I can't claim any having done that. But so I think, and I think you can understand that we're doing the broad picture of all the different lung diseases. We're looking at COPD. We're looking at asthma, which is something I've been thinking about a lot, because if we have a second, tell me if I'm going on too much.
Nope, you're great.
With asthma, 25 million Americans have asthma. 5 million of those have, it's just under 25, excuse me, and 5 million are children. And the children thing interests me so much, because right before the pandemic, so take the pandemic aside, there was this amazing statistic that said children between the ages of 5 and 17 have missed up over, it's actually 114.8 million school days.
Wow.
And that always struck me, even before I started working for the American Lung Association. But now when we think about all of the concern about getting our children back to school, about the negative impacts of missing school and so forth, And I'm thinking about this and thinking, I hope people will remember that when this all goes away and their kids are back at school and everything's great, there is still this whole section of kids who are going to miss school days because of asthma, or parents who can't get to work. So that experience that parents and children are finding very difficult right now, that's life.
Yeah.
For people with asthma. And you know, when you throw out a number like, 5 million kids, it's actually about 10 to 11% of the population, saying, of kids in Oregon have asthma. So how do you visualize that? And I was thinking about this on my way over here, and I was thinking, okay, so a soccer team, which a lot of kids play, at a professional level and an adult level, it's 11 people, but I think kids, it's 10 or under. So if you think about that, that can roughly equate to every single soccer team you see playing in a park at a weekend. Every soccer team in every county in this country, one kid has asthma. It's not literally that, but think about that as an image for just how widespread asthma is.
And it's a growing problem.
It's a growing
isn't
problem.
It?
And it's also, I have a very close friend, and she had severe asthma when she was growing up. And, I had the pleasure of getting to know her parents very well, but I remember her telling me this story about how her parents would be standing at the foot of her hospital bed, and they'd be all reassuring. And every so often she'd fall asleep and she'd wake up, and they didn't know she'd woken up, and she could see the look of absolute terror on her parents' faces. And I always think about that whenever anybody starts to talk to me about asthma.
Yeah.
So you can trust us.
Yes. Yes.
In a good way, we're all over the place.
Yes. Well, thank you so much for sharing all that information about the organization itself. We're going to go to a quick safety video and learn how to ride our bicycles safely, including on Reach the Beach, and then we'll come back with Julian Dillon from the American Lung Association and talk about a great bicycle ride that's coming up called Reach the Beach. So let's watch our safety video.
Skull, dome, melon, nut. No matter what you call your head, I think we can all agree it's worth protecting, right?
Yeah!
When you're doing something cool like riding a bike, you'll find that hazards are everywhere. From car doors to gravel on the street, to dogs crossing your path. Yeah, even the cute ones. Crashes can happen, even to those with awesome biking skills. In a fight between your head and the pavement always wins. So it makes sense to protect your skull and the valuable gray matter inside by wearing a certified helmet. Think you look like a dork? No way. There are plenty of cool looking helmets out there with tons of styles and colors to choose from. There's downhill and BMX helmets, mountain bike helmets, road helmets, and racing helmets. Whatever style you choose, just make sure it's for the kind of riding you're doing and that it's safety certified. Visit any good bike shop or sporting goods store if you're unsure what kind of helmet you need. They'll have people there to help you make the right choice. Even a certified helmet has to fit right to work properly. So when picking your size, make sure it doesn't wobble around or fall off when you nod yes or shake no, even when the straps are undone. Some helmets come with extra pads you can attach or a nifty crank to help you get dialed in. See? So once you've found the right helmet that fits you, remember the 2v1 rule. With your helmet sitting level on your head, you should have no more than 2 fingers between your eyebrows and the bottom of the helmet. The side strap should form a V shape just below your ears. Adjust the chin strap so only 1 finger fits under there. Like so. When you open your mouth wide like this, the helmet should still feel comfortable. Taking care of your new helmet is easy. Just keep it in a cool, dry place, away from excessive heat or direct sunlight. That's bad for the foamy stuff that protects your brain box. Clean off any grossness with a mild cleaner, like dish soap and warm water. A certified helmet will last 3 to 5 years, but after that, it's time to get a new one. And if you have a crash or are there any visible signs of damage, your helmet is officially toast. There are no accidents, only crashes, but nobody has one on purpose. So protect your brains and wear a helmet when you ride. This important message is brought to you by CanBike Manitoba, the Manitoba Cycling Association, and the Manitoba government. Have fun. Ride safely.
Oh, those Canadians, a funny bunch. That was a great video, but definitely some very relevant information, so I hope you take that to heart. So before we get back to Julian to talk about Reach the Beach, I do want to encourage cyclists to ride their bikes. There's a lot of fun cycling activities in our area during the spring, summer, and fall. And, you know, whatever that, I've tried to mention different kinds of rides in the past few shows. I do a lot of road bike riding, so my bias tends to be that direction. But many of us do want to participate in some sort of a charity ride this summer, and it may be Reach the Beach. So we're going to discuss that in just a moment. I want to define a charity ride, and we'll let Julian correct me later if he thinks that's going to be appropriate. So a charity ride, to me, is a ride that benefits a group or an organization. So you have to pay to participate in the ride like you would any other event type ride. Like STP or Monster Cookie or something like that, and then you are well taken care of on the ride. You're fed. There's porta potties, everything you're going to need. Usually support, so people driving cars that if you really get in a jam, they're going to pick you up and take you someplace. But in addition, on a charity ride, you're agreeing to raise money for that organization, and you can do that. A lot of people just write a check. They just get out their checkbook and say, okay, you want this much money, here it is. Other people raise money at work or with their friends or whatever they enjoy doing. So that's part of it. So a charity ride, you're going to help them raise money. And you can form teams or you can just go it alone. It's up to you. But to me, these rides are win-win because you raise money for an organization that you believe in and you get this great bike ride and have a lot of fun with other people who feel similarly. So American Lung Association, as we just talked about, raises money to continue helping people, and then if you do their ride, you help them do that. So it's time to post your summer rides on your calendar and get registered. Start setting some goals and just incremental steps to help you succeed this summer in doing what you want to do as far as a ride. And that might be just some shorter distances like Julian described, or it might be some big epic thing that you want to do. Maybe your first Cycle Oregon or riding a full century, 100 miles, which could be a Reach the Beach route. So check out some of those rides that are up on the calendars now, and you can check out some of our older archived YouTube videos that talk about doing spin classes or yoga or using Zwift, things that you might want to do in the inside in the Northwest rather than be out in the rain riding your bike, although it's been really nice weather lately. So let's finish up our conversation with Julian Dillon, the Executive Director of American Lung Association. And we're going to talk now about the bicycle ride called Reach the Beach. So what is Reach the Beach, Julian?
A great day. It's actually considered to be the best supported ride in the Pacific Northwest. So yes, you're exactly right the way you described it. It is a charity ride. The thing about a charity ride, I would add, is that generally speaking, you pay far less in a registration fee because where you're really going to make the difference is in the funds that you're raising. And it's also, on Reach the Beach is this, but also charity rides, it's a connection that's not just around cycling. So lung health happens to be the issue for us. You talk to somebody that you are raising funds for a lung disease or the American Lung Association in general. Chances are you're connecting with them about something that might have happened to themselves, or they may have lost a family member. So it is an amazing way to connect with people. But it's also just a wonderful ride here. And I mean, we can come at it from many angles. I think the best one is anyone can do this because we have different lengths.
Yes.
You can ride 25, 50, 75, 100. You get the same level of support no matter which you do. You've got snacks and food all the way along. You've got, as we call it, SAG. So there's somebody to help you if your bike gets a flat or if you're feeling like you've decided to ride more than you really wanted to. And then we have wonderful food and an experience at the finish line. So in a nutshell, that's what Reach the Beach is.
Yes, and I've done Reach the Beach a few times, and I really like that idea that, yes, there's a connection as you're riding in groups of people you've never seen before. You're right, you know that you're all there for the same purpose, and it's really a feel-good moment when maybe you're struggling with the ride itself. You're thinking, yeah, we're all in this for the same cause, and it does make you feel good about that. And I think, too, it's a judgment-free zone. That is, nobody cares if you're on the 25-mile route or the 100-mile route, good for you, but it's to do what you can do, just doing your best.
Yeah.
So I think that's a plus, too. So when will Reach the Beach be in 2022?
It will be on May 14th, which is a Saturday.
Yes, one of the earlier rides, but that's good. I mean, we like our rides spread out.
I think it's almost like the start of the season for a lot of people.
Yeah.
So exactly, would be Saturday, May 14th. So a lot of people will probably choose to spend the whole weekend down in Pacific City, which is great, where we end. And family will come down and join them.
Yes.
So it's just think of it as riding to a party.
It really is. So you've been working on this, and it's kind of morphed with the pandemic and all that. What's your vision for 2022? What do you think it's going to look like?
Well, my vision is for it to look like what it looked like in 2019. That's the big thing. So we're going back to very similar routes. I think there's a slight change to the starting point for the century, but everything else is pretty much the same, and that century starting point will, you'll very quickly morph into a route you'll recognize. I want people to feel like we're back. And I want to feel like there's some normalcy coming back into their life after almost 2 years of a very abnormal existence. And I almost feel like this is the moment where they'll take the ride, and when they get to the end, it'll be, yes, the door has opened again.
Yeah.
We have a full season of cycling ahead of us, and we are going to ride through the summer, and we're going to get all of that joy back from cycling. That to me is the biggest vision that I have for this is we're back.
Yeah. Boy, I sure hope so. Why do you think that Reach the Beach has been so popular over the years?
I think consistency. I think we have delivered a product, if we can call it that way, and it seems to have, when changes are made, it seems to get better. I think the fact that we create an experience that people go home and talk about and want to do again next year. I think the fact also that we can bring people in at a level that they feel comfortable. I have known, for example, a situation of a particular rider who had a disease connected with a ride I was doing for a different event, but it's still relevant to this story, and called me up out of the blue because he saw my number and asked about the ride, and it was about 3 days before the ride, and I said, well, just come on down to the finish line, see what it's like. So he came to the finish line, he was chatting to me. I happened to be seeing some volunteers who had to move some stuff, and I made some comment like, oh, can those chairs go further to the left or something? So he rolled up his sleeve, picked up the chairs. Next year he rode the 25. Following year he rode the 50, and so on and so forth. Now he's down there in LA leading weekly century ride training rides.
Wow.
And I love that story because, first of all, it addressed a health issue he had, but it just tells me that this is what cycling can do. And it reminds me that people sometimes ask me, what's the difference between a bike ride and a marathon or a stair climb or... And I think one of the big things is when you get into cycling, you can't get away.
It seems like it, yeah.
And it becomes something that you live for. Whereas I think certainly some people, I know there are a lot of very serious marathoners or stair climbers out there, but often that is like a one and done event where you want to get in there, you train for it, you do it, you feel amazing as you should, but you've done it.
Yeah.
It's a story to tell the grandkids, see that big building over there, I once climbed every step of that 5 times. Whereas the cycling part of it, you're like, oh, there's Grandpa back out on the bike again. He's been doing that for the last 50 years.
There he goes again.
Yeah.
So you touched on the routes. Describe them a little bit for us.
So we're going from Tualatin down to the coast at Pacific City. We're obviously trying to avoid as much of the major highways as possible. So certainly the first half to beyond Amity. So we're going from Tualatin, we're working our way over to Carlton. We're obviously not going down the 99. We're going up along Bell and around the edge of Newburgh and sort of finding our way around the back past some very nice vineyards.
Yes.
And winding up at Carlton, which is also where the 75 mile would start. That's then working its way down to Amity, once again skirting the edge of McMinnville and things like that. And then after that, the scenery starts to change. You get less vineyards and less about the Willamette Valley, and you're more about these wonderful, narrow, windy roads through these credible forests.
Yes.
I couldn't believe it when I saw them the first time they came up here. It takes you down to Grand Ronde, which is where the 25 mile starts, and where we have one of what seems to be our riders' absolute favourite features, which is a salmon hash.
Yes.
Oh, good.
Yes.
Glad you agree, which we said there. And a small point for somebody, if you dig around on YouTube, you could probably find a video of me attempting to cook salmon hash. Because when we couldn't do the ride at all in any shape or form in 2020, we decided, okay, let's get the chef who makes the salmon hash and create a 10-minute video of how to make it at home. So he starts doing it, and then I'm just standing there, and he's like, so there I am, burning the salmon hash. And then from there, we work our way to, well, basically it's by the Pelican Brewery at Cape Coanda. One thing for those who have done this before, we've made a slight change because it was kind of difficult getting through downtown Pacific City. So we're going a little bit north and then working our way back around and coming in that way. It'll still be the same magnificent ride, and in fact you'll have a nice hill to coast down as you come into the finish line.
And it seems as if when your route that crosses the Coast Range is relatively easy. I mean, certainly there's a hill,
yes,
but there's a lot more difficult ways to get to the Pacific Ocean.
And actually, thank you for bringing that up, the biggest amount of elevation on the Century, and it's the biggest on the whole thing, is in the first 10 miles or so. It's basically getting from Sherwood around Newburgh over to Carlton. And so we're kind of going along Bell and up around the back there, and that's one of those roads that you can drive along and think, oh, there's not much climb here. And then you try it on a bike.
And it is a hill.
Yes, it is.
I usually ride from Amity.
Okay.
And that's, just like you described. It's just very beautiful and, not horrifically challenging, and just a good time. And, get to Grand Ronde and eat a wonderful meal, and then you finish up the ride.
Yeah.
And then you're at the brewery.
Absolutely. And then for those who don't have family down there, we have the buses.
Yes.
They will take you back to your starting point so you can hop in your car and head on home.
Right. So there's buses at the finish line that take you to each of those starting locations, whether it's Amity or Tualatin or whatever.
Yeah.
So very easy.
Yeah.
And they bring your bicycle too.
We do. Yes. That's an important detail.
So you mentioned there were a couple of tweaks from 2021, but sometimes bicyclists say, well, the reason that the interest in this particular ride has dropped off is because it's always the same. But the Reach the Beach has been much the same, few little tweaks here and there for years, and people love it. Yeah. I mean, I've never talked to anybody that just doesn't.
I think, we are going to be making some changes. There'll be some, but there's small details around the edge, because my feeling is, and love to hear anybody who wants to go onto our website and tell me different, because I really want information. I'm only been in this for 2 years, so the more I can hear from people, the better. But my feeling is, after the last roughly 2 years of COVID, we want familiarity. Yeah. We want to see that thing again that we remember. and we didn't get in 2020, and we got a sort of a different variation of it in 21. And I think people would like to go back and go, there it is.
I think that's a good philosophy. I think that'll serve you well.
But I am very, almost to a point of recklessness, very open to suggestions for ideas and changes. So anybody wants to get on the phone or contact me and say, did you ever think about this, that, or the other?
Right.
What will probably happen is I will suggest it to our great logistics team, and they will throw me out of their office. But, you know, we can always try.
But you're right. There's some cyclist somewhere that knows some.
Yes.
Who knows? It's worth a listen.
Yeah.
So we talked a little bit about the climbs you kind of mentioned, and those would be the challenges along the route, wouldn't you say?
The wind.
The
that
wind
can be an issue in the last portion of it. So for people doing the 25, I would say don't feel you're doing something wrong if this feels like a harder ride than it should be. And I'm not trying to put you off. It's just, you know, if you know you can get these winds coming off the coast, and I know 2018 or 2019 they had some bad rain down towards the coast, but it had mostly gone away by the time the bulk of the riders got there. So, so the wind, a little bit of, you know, it's May. We live in the Pacific Northwest. I don't think we'll have a snowstorm, but you never know.
You never know in the Pacific Northwest. But yeah, I remember that 2019. We had gotten to Pacific City, and then when we were getting on the bus, it was raining. But most people were in, like you said.
Yeah.
So it was late in the day. I think you touched on what's so special about Reach the Beach, just that connection.
Yes, and I would say to people to think about what you're doing when you're riding, and to think, like, I love the idea. I've also been someone who's done events as just a participant, and I love the idea that I'm making a difference to somebody I've never met or something I've never even thought about. And somebody told me about something recently. She just put it to me this way. She said she was saved by a billboard. And I said, well, what do you mean? She lives in LA. She was stuck in traffic, there's a surprise, and she saw a billboard for Saved by the Scan, which is something we promote at the American Lung Association, which is basically, you know, get a scan for, and now the age range for recommended for a low-dose CT scan has changed as of 2021, so it's now from between the ages of 50 and 80. And also, we've expanded, or the government has expanded with our encouragement, that if you have been someone who smoked within the last 15 years, you should talk to your doctor about this. So she was someone who had given up smoking, I think, about 5 years, and she sees this billboard a couple of times, and she goes to the doctor, and the doctor's, well, I don't know, maybe. And then she sees the billboard again, and she decides, you know what, she's going to do this, and I'm going to look at my notes to get this right, because she turns out she had stage 1C non-small cell lung cancer. So she had to have an upper left lobectomy, and she had 17 lymph nodes removed and went through 4 sessions of chemo. And she's alive, and she's clear, and she says she's saved by the billboard. But the reason I bring that up is those billboards are there because people get on a bike in events like Reach the Beach. Because that's how we either pay for a billboard, or we are paying for a research that has impressed some company that says, you know what, I'm going to sponsor a billboard for you. So keep that in mind. Someone you've never thought of, maybe someone all the way across America, is benefiting from you pushing your way through that wind.
Yes, well, I'll try to remember that. Is there an alternative to riding these routes you described?
Yes. So every cloud is a silver lining, and some of the things that came out of COVID was we created what we call Cycle Your Own Way. And this was actually a great development because suddenly people were coming to us and saying, you know what, I've always wanted to do this ride. I have never done it before because I have a little bit of a health situation where I feel compromised, or in fact, I believe a past maybe president of your own bicycling club is one such person who didn't want to ride in a big ride. And this has opened the doors to people to go out, map out their own 100 or any distance they like, where they like, do it when they like, or come in and look at our routes on the website and decide I'm doing it the weekend before with just a bunch of pals. Or sometimes we have a situation where a wife will do it, the husband will follow along in the car. And it's opened the door to people to, I think they feel less pressured, they can do it.
Yeah.
If you're going to do it under your own steam and cycle your way, we're not going to ask you to pay a registration fee, because the registration fee covers the costs on the day,
Right.
basically,
Right.
and the cost of the web, your share of the website and all of that. So and if they fundraise, they get all the great different fundraise incentives, cycling jerseys like the ones you have here. There's jackets, we actually have a great thing this year, which is every person who registers will get access to some enhanced features from Ride with GPS that normally you'd pay for. Every person who registers. And then our top fundraisers are going to get this very special deluxe package for a full year from Ride GPS. So I think that's kind of an exciting development for this year.
You're always thinking, always trying to make it better, more enticing. So there are challenges on this route, and you've mentioned this because it's a broad topic, but who are your typical riders? I mean, are they like Tour de France kind of people?
It's everyone. It's every kind of mix. It really is. I mean, and it's all age groups. I think like a lot of cycling groups, we tend to have you don't tend to get as many people in their early 20s. And I think that is anything that's more endurance. Like if you look at a marathon, I'm pretty sure I'm right about this, that you will tend to notice that the age skews maybe late 20s or 30s up, and is really the bulk of people are somewhere in the 30s to 40s. And I think that's somewhat similar for this bike ride and most bike rides I've been involved in. But it's people from every conceivable background riding for every conceivable reason, and it's the fun of talking to people.
Yeah.
Because some people haven't even really thought about the cycling part. They're doing it because they want to get involved in a cause they're either connected with, or they just want to do it for a cause. And some, I shouldn't say this, but they probably wouldn't even be able to tell you who the benefiting organisation, like you say, they'll say, okay, the minimum is whatever it is, 200, give me the here,
Yep, I want to do
Swipe that card and away we go. And so I think that's the great thing. It's such a huge cross-section of, I won't say the cycling community, it's a cross-section of anybody with a bike.
Yeah. What about e-bikes? Can we ride an e-bike?
Yeah.
Yeah. So
you can ride an e-bike.
If that makes a difference for you to participate?
And I actually was talking to a rider who used to do our event, and she'd stopped because she felt she'd, reached a certain age in her life that she really wasn't up to it. And she said, well, wait a minute, I get an e-bike. And I just said, get that e-bike.
Yeah.
And she registered the following day.
Great. So this is kind of a joke between the two of us. Is there help for people between now and May 14th to help people get ready?
I don't know, Anne. Is there help?
So I put up the Reach the Beach jersey and a Portland Bicycling Club jersey for a reason, because we kind of partner on this part of it, in that Portland Bicycling Club does have training rides.
Yes.
And they're starting this coming weekend in February. And we would usually have a Saturday ride, but sadly one of our club members has passed, and so we're going to have a memorial service. But Sunday, we have West Side rides every Sunday. One of our club members does rides on the west side of town in the Beaverton, Washington County area. And then we've got rides pretty much all over the Portland metro area. We start in different locations. They get longer and longer as we get closer to the date of the event. But some friends and I offer shorter versions. So, we'll just offer 20 or 30 mile versions of the longer rides, so you can come out and not have to ride as hard, as long, as fast. And we'll make those group rides. We'll all stay together. And it's a good way, too, to develop your skills, to develop your fitness, and to learn how to ride in a group, because invariably on Reach the Beach, a lot of people participate. So you might ride alone part of the time, but a lot of times you're going to be in with other people. And so how to handle that situation to stay safe, and that's something that you learn by doing it.
Yeah, I mean, then learning how to ride in a group is very important, particularly because the roads are narrower here in a lot of it.
Yes.
So, you know, you want to be able to navigate safely past someone or let someone get by you. So you need to know things like on your left.
Exactly. That's a big bugaboo with me right now. On your left. So we've just got maybe a couple, 2 or 3 minutes left, Julian. And how can we get more information about doing Reach the Beach?
You would go to our website, which is reachthebeach.or, like Oregon.org. And on there you will also find my information, so you can reach out to me. And I'm very particular about this. I don't ever want people to feel like, oh, you know, he's the executive director, I shouldn't ask some question that they may be considered too basic. There's a reason that our contact information is on there. We want to hear from you, we want to help you. Because I want to help people not just do this and be successful in their fundraising and their ride, but I want to help them to get to enjoy cycling.
Yes.
Because I have seen how that can turn around people's lives in the most amazing way.
I like that. And you're right. I've always found you to be very accessible. Unless there's some weird reason, you're on it. Is there anything you want to share that we haven't discussed yet?
No, I'd like to just say this that I think is really important. If we again look at COVID, history is going to be written about this, and there's going to be books written, and people's children or grandchildren are going to be asking about this. They're going to say, hey, what was it like to have been around during that period? And you will explain what it was like, but the question may come up, well, what did you do? And I think it's anybody who gets involved with our ride is going to be able to look at that kid in the eye and say, I was in the trenches trying to do something about COVID. I was riding a bike to support an organization that was helping find the cure and helping make sure that your generation never has to deal with this again. Or if you do, you're far better prepared for it than, frankly, we all were when this started.
Yeah.
I think that's always worth remembering, that you're making your mark for the future when you do something like this.
You really are. You're making a difference. You really are. So give us some encouragement to potential riders to come on out and do Reach the Beach.
Okay, so I would say, let's think about what maybe is the impediment to you doing this in your mind. And I think one is, can I make whatever ride it is that I'm thinking of doing? And the only way you're really going to find out is to put down your marker and say, I'm going to do this. The great thing is, if you decide to do the 100, you can turn around and do the 50 on the day. We want you to be comfortable. We don't want you to get up the following day and go, I never want to get on a bike again.
Yes.
So my encouragement to you is try it. You've got that in you. You can really do it. If your concern is the fundraising, then all you have to do is ask. That's the big thing. You'd be amazed how many people will donate if you just ask them, because they have lungs too.
Thank you, Julian, for joining us. Great information. Come and do Reach the Beach. Thank you. Great job, Julian.
Great, thank you.